So generally, if you take a look at the title of our lecture, it's quite long, and generally it means that we will talk about migration, not fertility itself, but birth intentions, and even talk about some political migrants. So in this case, we will be talking about the problems of sociology, political science, a bit migration science, and so on. So it's quite a general talk, and you can see that it was that the data that we used and generally all this research and service were possible only in a close collaboration with the members of the other research groups, and generally I really acknowledge them. And I should say that some of the results of the pilot research was published in working papers. The results of the main research are still not published yet, even as a working paper. Maybe next year we will put it as a working paper and so on. So research is still ongoing. Okay, but now let's go, and I suppose we can make it a bit interactive. I can generally maybe address you some of the questions, or maybe try to share with you some of the ideas, or maybe, I don't know, just listen to some ideas from you. So is it possible is it necessary for the recording to use mic or not?
No.
Oh, Daniel, this one works as well. Okay, Daniel, for the recording, everything works like this. Okay, good. So, why it's important to look at the Russian migrants, actually? Because I should say that from the position of demography, for example, it's absolutely senseless to do it. Why it's senseless to do it from the demographic positions? What's your opinion? From just the pure demography.
Just because the number of
exactly.
Migrants is comparable towards other groups of migrants, I would say, relatively low.
It's relatively small. How many of them? So, for example, let's compare them with Ukrainian Ukrainian refugees. So, who are generally not called refugees in the European Union. If you try to find refugees, you will find not so many of them. But okay, so the figures coming from the United Nations HICL. So 4.2 million generally got the temporary protection mechanisms in European Union. So now 4.3. So generally it's quite a stable figure. These are Ukrainian refugees. What is the population of Ukraine? 40 million, yeah? Even less. So, take a look at the relative figures, very big amount. So, okay, good. The number of Russian migrants may be between 8 or 900,000. Some of them returned. So maybe 6 or 700,000. So it's nothing. What is the population of Russia actually? 140 million, yeah?
I have a question. Would you agree that it's, in general, hard to count the number of migrants who left Russia?
Exactly.
Because, for example, I'm not from Russia myself, I'm from Armenia. My family left Armenia 15 years ago, but I'm still registered in Armenia, and I still count this population for Armenia.
Exactly, and in this case, you are just one of the reasons why in Armenia, the reasons for the difference between vital statistics and census statistics in Armenia. And because of this unregistered persons, this gap between census and vital statistics in Armenia is something like 500,000, which is for Armenia something like 1/4 of the population. 1/6 of the population. The same is for Moldova, the same is for Bosnia, the same is for Albania, and so on and so on. But generally for Ukrainian population, it's more or less easy to calculate, because in Europe they've got the temporary protection status. And if you say that, okay, generally we will say that these persons with the temporary protection status are the refugees, it's okay. If we just close our eyes to the situation that they could cross the border every month. Good. But still, generally, it's small number, so it's less than 1% in case of the Russian migrants. So from the demographic point of view, it's not so interesting. So just take a look at the Ukrainian map. Here it is. And this is the Russian map. talking about Armenia, as we're starting to talk about Armenia, this is the statistics made by the Bell. I have no idea, frankly speaking, yes, to YouTube as well, actually, how did they get this data? Because if you try to find the same data for Armenia, if you take a look at the long-term permissions, short-term permissions, crossing the borders, you will never get this figure. You get these figures only from the interviews by the ministers of economics, if I'm not mistaken, and the ministers of the foreign affairs or internal affairs. So these figures are coming from the interviews. But, well, I couldn't find the data to verify. The same with Kazakhstan, for example. In Kazakhstan now you can get only the data about the residence permission, long-term residence permissions. There are not so many Russians with the long-term residence permissions there. For Georgia, yes, you can get this data. For Israel also you can get this data. Yes, from the official statistics it's quite easy to get this data. But, well, altogether figures are quite small. Altogether figures are quite small. So, okay, but one more time. Maybe it's technically incorrect to compare migration flows from Russia and Ukraine. Because, well, in Ukraine everything is clear, the outbreak of the war. For Russia, this is just people who were trying to migrate either from political repressions or from some economic harshness. So in this case, we can compare, for example, Russian migrants with Venezuelans. Well, of course, the situation is not so dramatic in Russia, but still generally, as one of the most dramatic points, we can take a look at Venezuela. These are the figures, official figures, how many Venezuelans left the country. Yeah, I understand that we are in the Institute of the Eastern Europe studies and so on. That's why maybe the majority of you don't know statistics about Latin America, but what is the population of Venezuela? You can just try to find, and then, well, I will just talk, and then one of you will find the population of Venezuela. I should say that, well, Venezuela could lose up to 8 million of its population. And generally, it's very popular in Latin American studies. Try to find the problems of the Venezuelan migrants in Panama, in Brazil, in Costa Rica, in Spain, and so on. You will find tons of literature about it. So, okay. So what is the population of Venezuela? Nobody asked ChatGPT? Just ask. Oh, here. Just ask this technical tool. Okay, but if Venezuela generally is not Eastern European case, and generally Iran is not Eastern European case, what interesting case comparable to Russia you can find in Eastern Europe? From the country from which you can find not the exodus, but quite an outflow of the highly qualified specialists after some political repression and economic decline. Yes, exactly, Belarus. So all Eastern Slavonic languages could be represented here. Yeah, Russian, Belarusian, Ukrainian. So all these countries technically could share the number of migrants who had to leave their countries. Good. What do you know about Belarus? Or how many migrants do you know? How many migrants do you know the country lost? It's not an easy task, actually, because in 2020 the statistics for Belarusian demography was closed, and the reason was mainly COVID. Actually, with a high mortality rate, they just closed the statistics and they didn't open it. Of course, some of the statistics you can get, but you cannot get statistics, detailed statistics for mortality, detailed statistics for fertility, detailed statistics for migration. So in this case, you can generally get some data from Polish sources, from Lithuanian sources, and so on and so on and so on. And then you can generally do some ideas about the population of Belarus and the number of migrants from this country. So, for example, one of the estimations that something like 100 or 100,500 persons left the country. So, in percentage, how much is it?
I think it's just maybe 10%.
No, 10% is 1 million for Belarus. It's 900,000. 1%. 1.5, something like this. A bit more. 1.1, 1.6, which is generally still bigger, larger number than the number of Russian migrants. So generally from Belarus, we still, in relative figures, have higher outflow. Yeah. And let's come back to our questions. Why we should take a look at this Russian so-called exodus? Yes, please.
Mainly because, like, in case of Russia, the reasons for immigration is not only political, with political opposition against the regime, but also due to the mass mobilization in 2022, I would say.
No, but if it's against mass mobilization, it's still political reason, yeah, because
like not all like mass mobilization opponents were always like against Putin. They sometimes even like flattened. For example, in Georgia, they appeared and said like, we still love our home Russia or mother Russia or something.
Okay. Yeah, from the political science point of view, it's very interesting to compare the opinions of these persons. I know that there are many quantitative and even more qualitative research about it, especially in Georgia and Armenia. What else is very interesting here? Many of the migrants, generally came for economic reasons. Some of these migrants were just relocated by their employers. And it's very interesting because it means that some of them were economically deprived as well. Maybe majority were economically deprived. And in this case, in my research, we are taking a look at the so-called economic deprivation of these migrants. So, for example, they were afraid of some, let's say, economic disadvantages. And what did they find in the countries of the destination? So it's very interesting to take a look at them and see generally their opinions and so on. So, going back to the topic and the title of this lecture, our group particularly was interested in the effect of this economic deprivation on their fertility intentions. So, why we are so interested in fertility intentions? Well, generally we are interested in fertility intentions because we are dealing with a group of persons who are relatively young still, but not so young as you, for example. They're a bit younger than me, or maybe at my age. So it's high time for many of them to give birth, first order, second order, and so on. Generally it's untrue that the majority of them are male. Well, of course, there are more male population than female population among them, but still quite enough. Many of them are coming as couples, and so on. So generally, these are persons who, with high probability, already planned their childbearing just on the eve of the war. Then they had to migrate, and what happened with their intentions. So for how long they can postpone. So they are well educated. Of course, the age is not like yours, so you can postpone as much for many years, for 10 years and something like this. So many of them cannot postpone for a long period of time, actually, because they're at the age of 35 or something like this. So biologically, it's, unfortunately, you cannot postpone for a long period of time if you're at the age of 35. So that's why it is an interesting research question, even for such a small group of population. And yeah, of course, you shouldn't be demographers to predict, the outcome of their birth intentions. So even without any shocks, what do you think could be their birth intentions? What do you think could be their predicted number of children? Do you think that they, with high probability, could give high birth rate or no? One more time. They're very well educated. They're mainly coming from the big cities. In big cities all over the world, even here in Berlin, actually the fertility is much lower than in the country. So in this case, we could predict that their fertility could be already very low. With the shock conditions, they could be lowest low. Yeah. So it's always interesting to see what's going on with them. But good. Let's go further. So this is to sum up. And well, before we generally go to this question of demography, and before we try to take a look at our models, well, we already discussed that we can predict quite a low fertility among them. Also, we can take a look about some methodological questions about migration. Yeah, because if you want to publish somewhere, you should be very accurate with the definitions. Yeah. But the last question is about demography. So what is the fertility here in Germany? It's not obligatory that you should know it, but just in case. So the fertility are measured in so-called total fertility rate, which is number of children per woman in active reproductive age, if the age-specific fertility rates will be the same within the whole period of time. So, what do you think? What it could be in Germany? 1, 2, 1.5.
Like 1.5.
Yeah, a bit lower. Yeah, it used to be close to 1.5, now it's maybe 1.3, something like this. So, well, just another question. Well, maybe by chance you read somewhere. You see, the war theoretically should influence the fertility rates of the population. Yeah, even if the war is not exactly in the place, but on some neighboring countries. Yeah, of course we understand that the total fertility rate in Ukraine is going down and so on. Well, what do you think happened with the total fertility rate in Russia after the beginning of the invasion? Maybe you read somebody, maybe you listened to some guys like in agent number 1000, Alexei Raksha, and something like this. Maybe you read this paper in demographic research devoted to the fertility after the war. No? Okay, try to guess. So, in Russia, the total fertility rate used to be 1.42, something like this. Then, invasion. And let's assume they don't care about it. Mobilization. A shock. What do you think happened with fertility?
I guess it dropped significantly.
Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Apart from some national republics. Generally, you can guess which national republics are these. So, generally, the total fertility rate almost didn't change. Only now it started to move down slightly, apart from some national republics. In some national republics, the total fertility rate started to grow. In the other national republics, it started to go down. If you make a simple correlation, what do you think will be one of the strongest correlators with this process? Exactly. So, in the republics, when the percentage of mobilized or drafted by the contract is high, the total fertility rate went down. These are Siberian national republics, for example, or Bashkortostan or something like this. In the republics that, well, generally tried not to sign any stuff, like North Caucasian republics, apart from Northern Ossetia, which is generally still the questions how we can accurately measure the number of, okay, I don't care about it, but still. Actually, in the North Caucasian republics, well, the fertility even started to grow a bit. Well, generally, and they tried not to sign any stuff. It's interesting. There is another interesting correlation, which you can also easily get from Russia. So, the number of persons who signed the contract in relative figures. It's not a very strong correlation, but still, there is some significant correlation between the number of men who generally were drafted or signed something, and well, their, let's call it life expectancy. So in the regions with lower life expectancy, people are so risky that they signed everything. So it means that risky people are risky everywhere. They sign the strange contracts, they drink a lot, they drive in drunken conditions, and so if you're risky, you're risky. Well, in North Caucasian republics, people are not risky, actually. It's not irony. People are generally much better dealing with their health. Okay, good. But we're talking about fertility. So in Russia, nothing changed with fertility. Almost nothing. Well, there were some fluctuations, and there is one explanation. There is a paper published in Demographic Research. If you're interested, you can find it, and so on and so on. We can talk about it. But what do you think? Where do you think are the countries where the total fertility rate in Europe dropped significantly? It's not Ukraine, because in Ukraine, of course, it dropped significantly. But not taking into consideration Ukraine. What do you think? This is so-called spillover effect. Yeah. So if there is a spillover effect, we see that in the neighboring countries, the fertility went down. And it's true. Take a look at the fertility in Lithuania, Latvia, Finland, Estonia, even not Romania, Poland, and so on. In the whole Eastern Europe and some Northern European countries, it just came down. Is it a spillover effect or not? I don't know. But some of the demographers speculate that, well, generally, maybe because of the uncertainty, because of there is a war, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. Okay, good. So even not migrating, the situation with the war gives you some uncertainty. Good. So, and then, one more time, going back to the definitions. How can we call the persons who leave Russia? Can we call them refugees? Debatable. It's a very debatable question, because I just wanted to show you some detail about the UN Refugee Agency that generally shows here, well, generally the country of asylum and the country of origin. Okay. Is there an internet connection here? Oops. Because, well, generally there should be bubbles here.
So, what are you trying to achieve?
No, generally this is the. So originally there should be bubbles here.
Okay.
So originally there are bubbles here. Strange. Because of course we can open we can generally open the trends and so on, but well, generally I just wanted to show you on the inside, because yeah, this one is not something that I wanted to show you. Yes, of course, this one generally shows us the country of origin, the region of origin, and so on. But on map it looks more interesting here. In map it looks more interesting, the country of asylum and so on. Okay, strange actually. Because actually in the data inside there should be some. There should be some maps.
It was bubble. They were bubble maps.
Yeah, okay. Very fine. Okay, genial. Just wanted to show you these ones. Okay, doesn't matter. But genial is this is a bubble map. But from here you see that there are many categories. What persons are, well, generally refugees. So here there are forcibly displaced people, refugees, returnees, other people who need international protection, internally displaced, asylum seekers, and so on. So technically the majority of the persons are not refugees. Refugees are when they already get the status, yeah? Many of them are asylum seekers or under temporary protection, yeah? So I don't know. There are some formal definitions. There are some formal definitions of the refugees. well, okay. There are some formal definitions of the refugees. It's here. So, well, generally, it's quite well. So, but I should say that, well, from one point of view, the persons who, well, generally left Russia could be somehow close to this situation, because the refugee, under one of the definition, is the person who didn't have time to prepare for migration. So in this case, for example, the persons who are migrating from Central Africa, somewhere, I don't know, from Nigeria or Ghana, from the regions without any political repressions or something like this, if they're just migrating for the better life, in most of the cases they're not refugees. Well, they're just well prepared for this and so on, so they're just economic migrants, that's all. On the other hand, the persons who are just trying to escape from mobilization, they are refugees because they don't have time to get the decision, yeah? To make a decision. Because, yeah.
What counts as time to make a decision if there's more on that? Because, for example, maybe you're living in a dangerous area for 6 months and then you decide, oh, it's actually got too bad now.
Well, it's not an easy task to understand actually how many years and how many months does it take for them. Because yes, I totally agree with you that, for example, if you're talking about the Syrian migrants or Syrian refugees, many of them were staying in the dangerous position for a long period of time and then they made the decision. And so on. Yes, please?
But I mean, when you take a look on the Russian like mobilization, if you call them refugees or not, but they also like got their like what is it called, like yeah, they also got like their letter within a day, and after a day they were like mobilized in army, and so they had to flee within a day. So
yeah, still within a day. But you see, the majority of them were not in this position, and the majority generally were just mobilized in a day. I should say that the majority of them just didn't come to this to these mobilization points, and nothing happened with them. But, well, there are two categories. There are two marginal categories. Those who just went somewhere away, and those who just came and were mobilized. The majority either came and were not mobilized, and generally never came. Well, but still, you see, I should say that if you call them refugees, the journals will hardly take your paper. But if you still generally take into consideration the situation that they had to make decision in a very short period of time, and sometimes their decision was driven by the country when you don't need the international passport or something like this. Well, you can understand the behavior of these persons, and well, more or less think about them as maybe refugees or something like this. So let's call them people who migrated under shock position, under shock conditions. Well, okay. Then another interesting case. If all these people are political activists, you already told that no, yeah, and it's absolutely correct. The majority of these persons are not political activists. So, and here is, for example, a sort of the pyramid of the figures. So, for example, if in Germany you calculate those who are formally political activists, so those who migrated with so-called paragraph 22.2. If you ever heard about this paragraph, well, generally they're not only Russians, but also Belarusians, Afghani persons, and people from Iran who could generally take this 22.2. Well, actually, the number of the persons who got these visas, well, it's not publicly available. You can just get some data from BAMF and some other agencies from Germany, and well, the figures are sometimes between 2,000 and 3,000. Well, if you take a look at the first time issued residence permits for the people with the Russian citizenship, you will see these figures. So 31.2 thousands in 2022. Well, these figures are without blue card holders. Well, generally, please add 10% for the blue card holders. And January 2022, why I don't like this year? because you cannot just easily explain the peak from 2022 by the war. Yeah? Why you should not be so sure that it's just the effect of the war? So 2022 in our lifespan. What is so remarkable for 2022? From the epidemiological point of view. Let's go back to the other ride of apocalypse. Let's go back to pandemics. What happened in 2022? What happened with quarantines and curfews? Well, in many countries they were cancelled, yeah? So, for example, you could more or less easily got the visa or residence permission to many European Union countries, to Japan and so on in 2022. So, because previously there was a COVID pandemics, yeah? So within the COVID pandemics there were some limitations. So in this case, there was a certain cumulative effect. So the people were just waiting when these restrictions will be cancelled. So in this case, you have higher number for 2022. So in this case, you have the problem when two general events occurred in the same period of time, and it's not so easy to distinguish between them. Yeah. So, is this peak because of the war, or is it because of the end of the quarantines or curfews? We cannot so easily say. We know that now it's going down. For 2024, there is another problem. There are many visa restrictions, and so on. So, and then try to compare them with the Russian-speaking diaspora in Germany. So this is the data, possibly, you heard about it, yeah? 1.4 million Russian speakers, yeah? This figure came from the micro-census in Germany. How did they do it? Well, there was a question for the people with the migration background, yeah, what home language do you use at home? Well, half of them, 54% of them used other languages than German. Sometimes with German, sometimes just these languages, that doesn't matter. 12% of them used Russian language. Who are these Russian speakers? Well, whoever you wish. Anyone. People who migrated from Kazakhstan, from Kyrgyzstan, 30 years ago, 1 year ago. Many Ukrainian refugees used the Russian language. Russian political activists, all these 3,000s, if they by chance were in this census, and so on, so all of them. So, you see within these pyramids that the political activists are just 0.1% of all the Russian speakers here in Germany. Maybe in the other countries like in Armenia, it's quite visible, yeah, or in Georgia. Yeah, because there were even not so many ethnic Russians in Armenia and Georgia within the Soviet period of time. Yeah? So especially Armenia was quite a mono-national country within the Soviet period of time. And ethnic Russians, well, there are not so many of them. Georgia was not mono-ethnic, but there were also not so many ethnic Russians as well in Georgia. So yeah, these are the exceptions. So for example, for Armenia, 100,000 persons, it's quite significant. Also, we don't know who of them political activists, who of them are waiting for visas, who are going to stay there. But for Germany, you see this number of political activists and the number of Russian speakers and even Russian origin, it's just nothing. So in this case, it's a very interesting stuff. Let's just go a bit from the side. I don't know if some of you is dealing with the dialects of the diasporas or something like, I don't know, the problems of the diasporas, like those who came several years ago or those who came quite early. For example, there could be some cohort clashes and so on between Russian diaspora, Turkish diaspora here in Germany, and I don't know, Serbian diaspora. No, nobody is dealing with this case, because it's always very interesting to take a look how the people who generally already live here for a long period of time, for several decades, well, deal with those who just came recently. Okay, doesn't matter. It's very interesting because one of the side effects of this research of the Russian-speaking persons is, especially here in Germany, is their intentions to the other Russian speakers here. So the dialects between diasporas, which is generally, you see, quite obvious question. Yeah.
So I remember the so-called election day in front of the Russian embassy, where there were a lot of people in the waiting line. The waiting line was like for 10 hours or something in the morning. And there were a lot of young people who came from 2022, 2023, so fled Russia, mobilization, war. And there were so-called Deutsche, who still own Russian passports and who vote. And there were some conflicts. It was interesting because majority of the people in the waiting line were mostly young people who did this midday against Putin protests. They were chanting anti-Putin slogans. But there were also some older people who came with Putin t-shirts and Russian flags, who are very proud of being Russian and who chanted against them that they are traitors of Russia and they should go back to Russia and go to the army and serve their homeland.
Yeah, and
Why are these people, older people, have been living here since 30 years?
Yeah, and they genuinely don't want to be a nationalist, but many of these people never spent a day in Russia because they were born in Soviet Union. And genuinely, I don't know, they lived somewhere in Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan and so on, and even never spent a single day in Russia. But okay, good. But just one more time, let's take a look at these figures. If you don't know the statistics and to take a look at the pictures from the embassy, you think that there are so many young Russians in Germany and so on, and not so many Putin verstehers. But if you take a look at these figures, you see that, well, the majority of these persons are those who migrated earlier. And generally, these ones with the residence permits and with the political activism, they are just a minority. Unless you don't take a look at the number of the Ukrainian refugees and consider them as the Russian speakers as well. And in this case, you have 50-50. Very interesting. You see, this is just the position of your research question. How you want to take a look on it. How you want to take a look on it. So, this is just to tease you a bit. Because, you see, when you're talking about the migration, it's not just demography. Okay, so let's just take a look at the previous research. These are just some research about the Ukrainians. And, well, this is some research about the Russian migrants. So, of course, you know OutRush group. The OutRush group, they already published quite a lot of papers about this recent wave of the Russians. And generally, the first preprint came, of course, from the demographic center of Rostock by Anastasidu. Anastasidu, generally, she is mainly the specialist in the digital demography. And they just use the digital traces. They just use the easiest digital traces like Yandex search and Google Trends. They looked at the requests to Yandex and Google, like migration, find a flat in Yerevan, or something like this. You can generally read it. And they looked at it on the original, not on the regional level, but on the municipal level. And of course, they found on the macro municipal level that from the most educated and high-income municipalities, well, there was the highest wave of migration. That's what the paper. Then they just published this paper, stopped at it, and came back to the digital demography. But the paper exists. Very interesting. And yeah, generally, the paper from OutRush, there are many of them. Well, qualitative methods, everybody who are dealing with it told that they were well educated, many of them married in partnership, and so on and so on. This was the previous research about it. The research about demography, I should say that in Germany, talking about the Ukrainian refugees, now there are quite a lot of them. They started to use FREDA, longitudinal survey. They started to use registers and so on, and now I suppose soon there will be first publications coming into journals. For Russians, of course, it's not so widespread, but okay. let's go back to the theories, yeah? If we want to publish something, we should make theories. So, there are 4 theories here. What do you think? From which theories? From these theories, how can we go back to the theories that could explain the behavior of the Russian migrants, taking into consideration all the speech that I already gave for you? So, socialization theory. Do you think that socialization could play a role here? Well, actually, yeah, why not? But the problem is that, well, many of them migrated at quite old age, old for the values actually. Means that they're not old, but genuinely old for forming the values, so in this case I don't think that their values changed. Selectivity theory, yes, of course they are well selected. Yes, they are well selected. Adaptation. Well, it's also a very interesting situation. So, maybe when after several years we compare those who stayed in Central Asia, those who stayed in Georgia, and those who stayed in Germany, maybe we'll find the differences. And maybe we'll find that those who stayed in Central Asia have higher fertility in comparison of those who stayed in Germany. But we should wait at least 10 or maybe better 20 years. So we cannot do it right now. We should wait. The life course theory. Well, yeah, we know that, well, generally they had to postpone their childbearing. And in this case, we can expect that soon they will give birth, maybe. Or will do it never. We will see. Then, we should say that there is a disruption hypothesis. So we should say that if we just combine all these hypotheses together, we will go to the disruption hypothesis. What does it mean? It means that, well, generally, we have some persons well selected, well educated, and so on, just at the age to give birth. Then we made a shock for them. They migrate somewhere. And now, after certain years of postponement, they should start giving the birth. And that's why it's very interesting how long was the postponement. So what the literature tells us about it? What the literature tells us about it? So, it gives us that, okay, let's make 3 hypotheses. So, first of all, the fertility intentions among the migrants from Russia who left the country soon after the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine are lower in comparison with the stares of the persons with the same characteristics but who stayed in Russia. Yes, because as I told you, there was almost no effect of the war on the Russian fertility. So in this case, we should say that the Russian population, they did not change their fertility. Okay, second, both high subjective income and stable legal status have a positive income of the fertility intention of Russian migrants. So if you think that you are not economically deprived, well, you think that, okay, let's give birth. Then, this is micro level. Then macro level. The welfare regime and the level of the country's social economic development can also increase fertility. So either your own income or the income of the country could increase the fertility. So, well, generally, Milevsky and Kraus already did some research based on the second hypothesis, but not with Russian migrants, but with many other refugees from the other countries, and they told that subjective income, the personal subjective income doesn't work. But okay, let's still try for the Russian some sample. Okay, then, what do you know? Okay, let's go back to the literature. What do you know about the fertility among all Russian migrants in European countries? So all Russians and Eastern Europeans. So what do you think? Any guess? If their fertility is higher or lower than the fertility of natives in European countries? So, I mean, we don't talk about the refugees, we don't talk about the students and so on, just overall. People from Russians or European post-Soviet countries like Russia, Ukraine, Belarus in the European Union. Yeah.
Are we counting those who were like a couple from those countries?
No, just women.
Okay, so who also
No, we're just taking in consideration just women. So Russian women, they have higher fertility than locals or not? We don't look at their spouses or partners. Yeah, so there is research about the diets and this mixed stuff, but well, generally it will be too deep into demography. Just take a look at the Russian women. Yeah.
It's actually like hard to say because when you take a look on like how many divorces you have in Russia, for example, they are like higher than like for instance in Germany. But I would say that right now like it's maybe like 1 or 2 children maximum. I mean it also depends on the
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. And then let's take a look at the results. Okay, let's take a look at the results. So, well, generally this is Sweden. In Sweden we have register statistics. So in this case we can more or less easily distinguish the women by the country of origin. So these are so-called post-Soviet states. It's easy to say because they are just at the bottom here. Here is the risk to have the third child in comparison with the local population, with the Swedish women. So the risk to have third child. So what can you say? It's lower, but not significantly lower, yeah? And now let's take a look to the risk to have second child. It's really significantly lower. But of course they're not, well, generally. But one more time, we're comparing them with the Swedish women. Swedish women have quite a high fertility, and so on. So for Scandinavia, the same will be for Norway. So in Scandinavian countries, the Russian women will have low fertility. In Baltic states, they will have low fertility as well. In Germany, well, the difference is insignificant. So in this case, well, we can expect that they will have somehow lower fertility, but of course this is controlled for everything, for social economic status, for income, for age, for everything. So we expect that they will have lower fertility according to the literature, but well, generally not significantly lower. So in this case, one more time, it's more interesting to take a look at the fertility of Russian women in Latin America, Georgia, Armenia, Central Asia, when the fertility of the population, local population is higher, but one more time, be very careful. Because, for example, now in Latin America, the fertility, even the local women, is the same as in Scandinavian countries, in Chile, for example, or in Brazil. But okay. And this is another interesting case. This is the number of children before and after migration. So, yellow are refugees. Well, this mint is family reunification migrants. These are students, these are labor migrants, but for students and labor migrants there are no incentives to give birth. But if you take a look at the refugees and families, it will be very interesting because we are just comparing non-European Union Eastern Europe. Well, when we have both Russians, Ukrainians, Belarusians, and Balkan, like Serbians and Albanians. But what is very interesting here? Because, well, actually, to the age of 34, the number of the number of children in the families of Eastern European women is very close to the Middle Eastern. Which is interesting. It means that after several shocks, they more or less adopt. So it takes them some time for adaptation and so on, but well, genuinely, all of them adopt. And just compare them with Iranians, because here is 1. And for them it's 2 and 3. Iranian refugees, yeah, generally we're not describing Iran here, but well, generally Iranian migrants, they demonstrated always very low fertility everywhere. The same as Chinese, the same as Thailand, from Thailand and so on. So the Eastern Europeans are 50-50, but generally the Russians are, in most of the cases, well, lower, but not so extra low. So, and then just show you some literature. Of course, the questions that we are looking, of course, it was observed by the researchers. And of course, there were several quite a large projects in Turkey. And sometimes they were just financed by the Turkish funds, sometimes they were financed by the Turkish and European Union funds, and they looked at the Syrians. For example, there is quite a big research in the Rostock Demographic Institute about the fertility intentions of Syrian women living in Turkey. They're just looking at the conditions and at the time, how long does it take for the Syrian women to go closer by their fertility intentions to the Turkish, because there was quite a big gap in 2010. So Turkey was already on the ongoing demographic transition. So nowadays in Turkey, the fertility is lower than in France, lower than in Sweden. Maybe lower than in Germany, but I'm not sure. If you take a look, if you just don't take into consideration the Kurdish population, the fertility in Turkey will be lower than in Germany. And 12 years ago, the intentions were already quite European. In Syria, the demographic transition was not so widespread. So in this case, very low and very long going projects are made for the Syrians in Turkey. They change at their fertility intentions, the realization of their intentions, and so on. They have 6 or 7 waves already. So if you just follow these links and generally try to follow the other links and so on, you will find many interesting research about it. So, and finally to our pilot research. What did we do? So, it happened already 2 years ago. So, it's pilot, that's why we have not so many respondents. And, well, we generally looked at the migrants. There were something like 300 of them. Some of them migrated before war, the others migrated after. The majority migrated after. Then we also tried to find the migrants with the close characteristic in Russia. We called them stairs. It was 2023. It was quite, well, not so dangerous. That's why we didn't put them into risks and so on. And, well, generally, this is just the comparison of our survey. And we see that, well, generally, of course, we've got some within the pilot, we've got some skewness. We have many persons from Kazakhstan and Finland, but not so many from Serbia and Montenegro. Like, for example, the persons from OutRush, or not so many from Turkey, not so many from Israel, and so on. But, well, actually, we had many of them from European Union, from Finland, from France, from Germany, and many from Kazakhstan. So these are our descriptive statistics. And already here you see the selectivity. So you see that the stairs and migrants, well, of course, they have different number of children. Yeah, because this is quite clear for you, yeah? You can explain it by the selectivity, and then you can explain it by the genealogy, yeah? It means that the persons who had children with higher probability could migrate, yeah? Especially if they have many children. However, if you just don't take a look at the respondents without children, we just withdraw all the childless from our sample, we will see that the number of children for the respondents who already have children will be the same for the migrants and stairs. So the age is close, income, yeah, the migrants were also people with a high income, they were richer, also selectivity. If you're not rich enough, you don't have enough funds to go somewhere, and so on. So, this is descriptive statistics one more time by children, the age of the first child, selectivity. So, yeah. Then, Then we are testing our hypothesis. The first hypothesis, comparing them with their steers. Comparing them with their steers. So, what can we see here? What can we see here? So, generally, what can we see here? Well, dependent variable. If the respondents have a desire to have children. And then, this is the migration status. The migration status. So, well, actually, with a big battery of the control variables, like the already existing number of children, status of partnership, age, gender, the place of living, for example, before, the place when they used to live before they left the country, the education, the subjective income, and so on, we see that, well, among the migrants, in comparison with the steers, of course, the desire to have children was lower, yeah? You see here by the odds ratio, there's a 0.56, oh, sorry, 57 and 53, so, well, it's lower. Good. Yeah, here it is. But, well, generally, only if the control for these agglomerations, for the agglomeration, for the education, for subjective income, it becomes significant. Previously, it wasn't significant. Then, let's compare the waves of the migration. So, generally, in this case, it gives us some hints about the either shock conditions, or on the other hand, it gives us some hints about the length of migration. So, if they already adopted for Thompson and so on. So, of course, those who migrated after war, they have lower intentions. The explanations could be one shock condition, the other explanation could be because they lived longer. So for example, those who just migrated lived shorter in this place. So in this case, they're not adopted. Well, it's confirmed, but, well, generally about causality, we can say nothing. Well, then, let's take a look on the migrants only. So, let's take a look at the legal status, if they already received the legal status. Well, the probability will be higher for them to think about birth, but, well, generally it's insignificant. Now, let's just modify it and say they want to stay in the country of destination. And in this case, controlling for everything, we can see that year. In this case, they will have high intentions. And one more time, this is an ingenuity problem. So it means that, well, generally, when the persons already understood that they want to stay in the country, they will think about giving the birth. Yeah. Sir, but let's take another one, another variable. Do they want to return to Russia? So let's assume that they want to return to Russia, which means that, well, generally looks like that they are disappointed in the place where they live. Yes, in this case, the intentions will be low, insignificant, but the results are insignificant. Then, finally, let's take a look at the subjective income. Let's take a look at the subjective income. Yeah, in this case, they will say something about their birth intentions with lower probability. Okay, let's just modify it and let's say, okay, we are not interested in the income as it is, but we are interested in the dynamics of the income. Because in our pilot, we addressed them questions about their income before leaving. It's retrospective questions. Yes, of course, it's very problematic. They could lie. Everybody lies. But doesn't matter. Okay, we can formally compare their income before and after. And of course, maybe you'll ask me the questions about the variable income. How did we measure it? Of course, we didn't ask them how many rubles per month did you have. No, of course, we asked them subjective questions, something like, So previously, you did not have money for food. You had money for food, but didn't have for clothes. You have money for food and clothes, but you didn't have for some durable goods, and so on, so on. The 6-point scales. So if the income dropped, well, looks like that the fertility intentions are going down. It's very logical, but we don't have enough observation for it. If the income grew, this is a totally mess because nothing happened with the whole sample. But for women, we have a slight growth, but it's totally insignificant. So, okay, confirmed somehow. And then, well, just take a look. Just take a look about the birth intentions in comparison of the European Union and the others. So, if the people are in European Union, and we compare them with the people in the other countries. So, if they live in post-Soviet countries, and if they live in Europe, non-European ones, which is generally Balkans, they have lower birth intentions. So, okay. And then interaction effects and so on. So finally, on our panel, we've got more or less results that, well, generally the income really matters. And then what will be our next step? The next step, non-pilot research, but the research with quite a large sample. Oh, OutRush group, you know, yeah, you read the reports about the reports from OutRush group. Yeah, this one. You know this link. No? Somebody use it? Because generally there are at least 4 waves of the reports about it, and generally they actually describe a lot about the intentions and about the, I don't know if many of you are dealing like polyscience more than sociology. I suppose it's something like you should work with carefully, yeah, because well, generally this OutRush link is something worse. If I have some time at the end, I will just show you. You can see these waves. But actually, this is a group of the researchers that started the regular monitoring of the migrants since 2022. Well, their sample is something like 10,000 observations, which is quite big amount. And what can we say about it? So previously they were talking about the situation with the economic conditions, with their political participations, if they, for example, have some contacts with Russia, if they have contacts with relatives, what do you think about Russian situation, under what conditions the migrants want to come back, and so on. Well, previous year we asked them to include a small questionnaire. Well, not the question, it's a question, a small part actually, about the birth intentions. And this year we also asked them to do that. And from the data, we've got some results. This year we're just looking forward for the data because this year we can already take a look at the realization of the birth intentions. So this year we can already see if the person's told that they have intentions to give birth. This year we can already take a look if the person or the person's partner is pregnant or if they already give birth. But we should wait until the end of this wave. But for the previous wave, we already get some results for the birth intentions. Yeah. We modified hypothesis. So, fertility intentions among migrants from Russia who left the country soon after the beginning of the armed invasion are lower than those of the steers and the migrants who left Russia earlier. The problem is that we cannot take steers. So in this case, we took those who left Russia earlier. The lower intentions could be among those who migrated within the period of mobilization. Let's assume that let's go back to the very beginning of our lecture, that they were just mostly shocked persons and they didn't have time to make the decision. That's why they could be the mostly deprived. Then, current income and the level of the country of destination development matters. There is a positive impact on fertility intentions. Then sources, well, we've got more than 7,000 observations, and we generally compare with our pilot. So, in our model, what was our dependent variable? The question was like this: are you planning to have children within forthcoming 3 years? Then the same questions: are you planning to have children within the forthcoming 3 years in the current country? Then, as a model, we took logistic regression, and we are generally reporting average marginal effects. Then, control variables, of course, current number of children under 18, age, gender, partnership, education, lived in capital before migration. Then we clustered the country of destination standard errors. Then we just controlled for the pregnancy status and so on. Well, these are the effects. So, what do we have here? So generally, do they plan to have children? So, first of all, in the first model, we just get the dummy variable. Migrated before war, migrated after war. Of course, if they left after war, the intentions were lower. Yeah, it's minus. Yeah? Average marginal effect was minus. So it means that the intentions were lower. Okay, good. Then, modify the questions. In the current country of destinations, yes, we understood you correctly, guys. We also have low intentions. Okay, maybe let's try our hypothesis with conscriptions. So, doesn't work. With the conscription mobilization, it doesn't work. No effect, actually. No statistically significant effect. But, well, generally looks like that still not the exact period is so important, but generally the time that was spent in the country. Yeah? The more time you had for adaptation, the better. Of course, demographically, it could be better to take a look at the Cox regressions and so on. That takes into consideration the time, but, well, we don't have enough observations to do it. So, well, generally, we try to verify it on our pilot. And, well, generally in our pilot, we also didn't get any results. Then, let's take a look at the income. Controlling for the migration status. So, controlling to the situation, how long time ago did they migrate. So, one more time, if you take a look at if you just make the dummy variable, high income, low income, when high income is the situation when they can afford themselves durable goods and something more variable, in comparison with those who have low income, who cannot afford sometimes food, sometimes clothes, and so on, so poor persons. So of course the richer persons are generally have high intentions. And yes, exactly when they can buy all durable goods, of course they can afford children. One more time. This is a very good proxy of the adaptation here. Maybe they already have high income because they found a job, know how the things are dealing in this country, and so on. Because even controlling for age, we cannot solve this problem, unfortunately. Then, let's take a look at the effect of the country. Okay, the blue one. Let's compare those who stayed in post-Soviet countries with those who stayed somewhere all over the world. Well, there is something very interesting here. Even if you take a look at the current country of destination, we see that in developed countries, Well, this one is okay, yeah. In developed countries, the birth intentions are higher. If you're asking, are you ready to give birth in the current country of destinations? If we are a developed country, our intentions are higher. It's logical. If we just ask them general, it doesn't matter. Generally, it doesn't matter. Maybe they want to go somewhere further, yeah? Here it matters a lot. But take a look at the blue ones. Don't you see something strange? Yeah. One stuff that you obviously see here, just take a look one more time, the reference category. The reference category, so we are comparing everything. We are comparing all the results here with the post-Soviet countries, So don't you think something strange here? No, it's not strange here. It's genuinely logical. It's not strange. But do you think something interesting here? The difference between graphs, the difference between Y. Because you see, one Y is give birth within 3 years. Doesn't matter where, somewhere. So the left one, the left Y. The right Y. Give birth within 3 years, but here, in this country when I stay. So, what do you see here? What do you see here? So take a look at the blue ones. So, in comparison with the post-Soviet countries, whenever you live, you will have higher birth intentions. If you live somewhere in Georgia, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, you don't want to give birth. If you're already in Argentina, also developing, Thailand, India, you give birth. Developed non-Europeans, Canada, yeah.
Do you think the reason is that because Russians who are in post-Soviet countries think that they're only temporarily there?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. So either there are persons, so you see, they think that they're absolutely right. They think that they're temporary there. For example, if you go back to the OutRush findings, yeah. They told that, for example, in Kazakhstan, only 22% of the migrants want to stay there. It means that they either still think that maybe they can go back to countries, to Russia, the minority of them, but the majority of them are waiting for the better opportunities to go somewhere else. Yeah, but in general, you don't see it, yeah? In general, you don't see it. But if the question is more or less specified, you see it. But still generally, why developed here is not so obvious. And generally, okay, here developed is still higher. But what are these developing countries? What do you think? Any guess? Why being in developing country is still attractive? Do you remember something about the right of soil and right of blood? Or have you heard about something like about reproductive tourism in Argentina? Yeah.
So, right of soil means that whoever is born on the territory of that country has the right to get citizenship, like in the United States. If you're born on the US soil, then you're...
Yes, United States will be developed non-Europe. But there will be also Chile, Argentina, Brazil, Panama, and so on. So-called developing countries. And generally, when we controlled exactly for Latin America, when we controlled for the right of soil, sorry, I didn't put it in this slide. Okay, but generally when we controlled for the right of soil and right of blood, well, developing with the right of blood, well, generally were non-popular. But the developing with the right of soil are very popular. So in this case, one more time, we are going back to the selectivity. They are here in Argentina, Panama, Costa Rica, doesn't matter. But Panama, Costa Rica are quite developed actually. But okay, even in the countries like Argentina or Colombia, they are there because they want to give birth here, exactly in this country, within the 3-year period. And then maybe they will go somewhere else. So we generally face the selectivity very clearly. Very clearly. And then we wanted to see the interaction effects. So, the country 0, developing, 1 developed. Then, blue one, we are coming from the low income subsample, red one from the high income subsample. All the countries, well, generally the slopes are close actually. It's better both in developed and developing countries to have high income, so nothing interesting. However, if you just ask here, do you want to give birth here, exactly in this country? So take a look what's going on. Here we're in developed countries, here we're in the developing countries. So if our income is lower and we are generally coming here so we're from the low income, we're in the developing countries. Of course, we have the lower, this is low. We are somewhere in the low income country with the low income. Our intentions are the lowest. But actually, you see, this is insignificant. Yeah, the confidence intervals are generally overlapping. Because if you are in developed countries, developing countries, but with a higher income, now generally you have higher birth intentions, but the difference is not significant. But if you're in developed country and you have high income, you have significantly higher birth intentions. Then, now we try to speculate, maybe welfare matters, not just the high income countries, but welfare. And all the Northern and Western European countries, we call them welfare. And welfare countries are just under number 3. But we see no difference actually between just developed countries and welfare. And you see, when we try to look at the pilot, we saw that in the pilot we have a bit different situation, because in the pilot everything looked better, more interesting actually. Because you see, in the full sample we've got nothing interesting. But in the pilot we've got some hopes that maybe we can sell it to good journals. So, one more time, we are in developed countries. If our income is lower, well, we're in developing, yeah? In developing in Thailand, in Argentina, in India. We have high income, our intentions are higher. We have low income, our intentions is lower. Then we migrate to developed country from Thailand, we fly to Germany. And doesn't matter what income we have. The country of destination gives us some hopes that this country, I don't know, Germany, Finland, and so on, gives us enough social package. And that's why we are genuinely sure that nothing wrong will happen with our children, and so that we will give birth. So you see, genuinely doesn't matter. And generally, another interesting situation, if your income is higher, doesn't matter where you are. It works only for the lower. But we got these results only on pilot. When we moved to the real sample, which was 20 times higher, everything, as you saw in the previous slide, disappeared. So it looks like that it used to be statistical artifact. Very good, but statistical artifact. Actually, we also have, but on the pilot we also find no differences between welfare countries and just rich countries. So, okay, and then just some other interesting stuff. So job. Let's assume that we have job. So, we are comparing the situation like, I don't know, referent actually, but referent category is that the person doesn't work and doesn't study, so-called need, yeah? So, if the person doesn't work and doesn't study, and we compare this person with the freelancer, And one more time, blue will be this Y, which used to be left, but now upper. Yeah, and this one, that was right. So in the country when you stay, now is lower, yeah? So, well, in all the country, if you're a freelancer, you say, yeah, of course, why not? I'm a freelancer, let's give it a birth. Why not? But in the current destination, matters. So, if you just work for some Russian companies, doesn't matter, in both cases insignificant. Others means that you mainly work in the country where you stay already. Well, in both cases you have higher intentions. One more time, maybe because you already spent a lot of time. Networks, also are interesting, but also could be the proxy of the length of stay. Yeah? Even if we're controlling for age, even if we're controlling for age here, we're controlling for the year when they migrated, but still maybe we don't control for all unobserved heterogeneity. So, but actually the more close friends you have, the higher will be your birth intentions. Of course, we could be naive and say, yes, it's because of the social networks, and being within the social networks, we have the social diffusion. We see that our neighbors have children, and that's why we think that it's high time for us to have children, but maybe we should say that there is still an observed heterogeneity that shows that still the more children we have, the more friends we have, the higher is our adaptation and the longer is the period that we stayed in this country. So yeah, still some questions. So the next steps. Additionally to the economic deprivation, we will control for political deprivation, because we have the country about the political deprivation and social deprivation. We have this question. No, the OutRush have this, not we, not our group, but the OutRush have, and they generally could share it. And we can take a look at the macro level as well. So, for example, at the macro level, instead of developed and development, we can take a look at the democratic, non-democratic country, or the countries with free media or non-free media, and so on. The social deprivation also, for the macro level, we still have the question, but for the micro level, it's possible to take a look. Do you think that it's dangerous for you? Do you think that somebody doesn't like you, and so on? And then the panel effect, yeah, of course. After the end of this year, we will get the result for the panel, and we can try to see the realization of the birth intentions. Okay. And, well, just the conclusion. If we go back to our political activists, so if you have children, it's very bad for our political activity. So here the Y is the participation of these activists in the political activity in Germany. And if they have children, they don't have time for it. But there are some good news. So, for example, here, this is the political activism among Russian activities. So, if you're genuinely trying to be active with the Russians and so on, the children, well, doesn't matter. And if you want to integrate into the labor market, also there is no significant effect of the children. So it means that the children doesn't disturb the political activists for integration into the labor market or for their political activity with Russian migrants or with Russians who stayed in Russia. So these are good news, but talking about the political activisms only. That's all. Thank you very much. Now the questions. The questions for the research, the general questions about the migration, fertility, and so on. Because it looks like that I don't have time for them. Yeah, I have only 5 minutes. Only 5 minutes. Okay, but still generally, maybe. Yeah, yes, please.
Would you say that income as a factor on fertility is more significant for migrants than it is for populations living in their home country?
According to the pilot, yes. Because, well, generally according to the stairs, income is not so significant. But I should say that, well, this brings us to the so-called economic theory of the fertility. And if you're the economist, you will say that, well, income always matters. But if you're a sociologist, you say that, well, income doesn't matter too much. If you just go back to Russian case, I should say that for the second birth, income generally is very important. For the first order birth, no, nothing of the kind. First birth intention is realized in Russia in any case. Second, very important. Third, somehow for some subsamples. Fourth, doesn't matter, fourth is already driven by cultural factors. Third, mainly by cultural factors, but there are some subsamples of the population driven by the economic factors. So, it means that for the stairs, it should work only for the second children. But if you compare and pilot stairs with migrants, for stairs doesn't matter, for intentions, for migrants works.
Yeah, that's interesting because you read a lot about like birth rates declining in Western countries and people thinking it's to do with the economy when really it's
well, generally you're absolutely correct because there were many research about the effect of the crisis. But don't forget that the crisis could be not just the decline of the incomes, but the informational uncertainty. You don't know what will happen. So maybe crisis is uncertainty. We don't know what's happened. And for example, the research by there are some experimental research by Vignoli, for example. They show that uncertainty matter more. Yeah, good. Other questions? Somebody raised a hand. Looks like no. Okay, yeah.
I have one question.
Yes, please.
So you mentioned that you are going to look at the panel effects in your future research.
We'll take a look at the panel, yeah, longitudinal ones.
How well birth intentions get translated to actual birth?
We will see.
And my question is, from previous research in demographics, do you see that what explains variation in terms of how birth intentions predict actual birth? So that must be a question that is, so you cannot assume that birth intention get translated. So there are factors that explain how well birth intentions get translated to actual birth. So what would you expect affects this process?
Well, generally good questions because, yeah, there are some categories that always try to give the socially desirable answer. I should say that that one of the mediators will be, in our particular case, if the persons change the country. I suppose that if the person changed the country, I'm afraid that doesn't matter what were the intentions before. In this case, we should just make the control variable for them, and that's all. This will be the negative one. Positive. For positive, I should say that the person say nothing about the social deprivation and so on. If the person doesn't feel deprived, I suppose that the birth intentions, we should take a look at the realization of the birth intentions based on the economic deprivation, political, and so on. So yeah, of course, we could take a look at the delta of incomes, delta of the political stuff, and so on. We will see. Yeah, unfortunately, we cannot just look very thoroughly on the time. What time is spent, something like this, but something that we cannot do. Yeah.
Thank you, and that's all the time we got. Yeah, thank you.